Tittle Tattle episode 99.0 something, 99.09, not sure. It's your exclusive for supporters in its entirety only media analysis show that Bill Doris, ex-TV Newsy, like me, and I do every week. Thank you for your generosity. If you get this in full, it is because you are a supporter. We are going to talk about those that may be losing supporters, the mainstream newsrooms. Taylor Lorenz is a very well-known tech/social media reporter. She's at the Washington Post right now, Bill. She's been everywhere, though. She was at the New York Times, and she does tend to have emotional reactions about things. She was very upset, for instance, that people came after her for her reporting, even though she often has a tactic of coming after other people in her reporting, feels attacked, even though she works for these major outlets that definitely have more power than, say, one person on YouTube or Twitter. But that aside, let's listen to what Taylor is saying right now about the media industry. Here we go.
The entire journalism industry is basically in a free fall. Today, the Los Angeles Times laid off 115 employees. They wiped out their entire DC bureau in an election year. They laid off pretty much all of their sports teams. They killed their entire tech and business section. They laid off breaking news writers, social media editors. The list goes on. But what's really dark is this is just the latest in...
Hey, Bill. Am I missing something with like why she's holding the lavalier mic, which has a clip on it and could easily be clipped to her shirt? Is this like a strategy thing?
No,
Is this a millennial thing?
I think it's more of a trend, and somebody started doing it, and then they made it so much of a trend that now there are some people who will use it, and it's not a clip-on lav. It's basically like a mini microphone that's that big. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's more like a trend than it is anything else. But I think people who fancy themselves more serious journalists like Miss Taylor Lorenz here, when they want to get their point across in their audio to sound crisp and clean, they'll do this. But it's also a trend. But I mean, we're talking about a woman who rages against billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Yes, but yet she goes and works for Jeff Bezos. So
I just don't understand sometimes when people have a mic that you can clip on your shirt, why you would hold it in your hand. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
we got lavalier mics in the new.
Maybe she wants her necklace to not clank, 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 and boop, boop, boop up against the microphone.
Come on. Anyway, I'm sorry.
I'm giving her way too much credit.
I just don't get it. Here we go.
Months and months and months of layoffs in the media industry. In fact, tens of thousands.
Okay, hang on. Going back to the mic issue, one last point. Maybe that's part of the problem, that it's about trends and not about like actually doing journalism. It's about the storytelling, in other words, the presentation, and getting more views because we're all holding the little microphone, and it's not about actually doing like legitimate journalism. I don't know, maybe the microphone trend and doing what all the social media influencers and just trying to get clicks or whatever, maybe that has something actually deeper to tell us about the issue we're talking about today. That's all I'm going to say about Taylor Lorenz's mic. Continue on.
Thousands of journalists have been laid off in the past year. Major media companies like BuzzFeed News have completely shuttered their news operations. Time Magazine also just laid off a ton of people, and Sports Illustrated basically shut down last week. Pretty much the entire digital media ecosystem that myself and a lot of other millennial journalists came up in has been completely hollowed out. And it's not just digital media sites. Local news has been obliterated. The newspaper industry is cratering. Radio is essentially dead aside from NPR, which has been gutted. Meanwhile, hundreds of workers at Condé Nast, the parent company of pretty much every major magazine from GQ to Vogue to The New Yorker to Vanity Fair, are on strike because they're also facing impending layoffs. Even mainstream national media outlets owned by billionaires like the Washington Post, where I work, and The Atlantic, where I used to work, have done layoffs. If you're a young journalist today, there's almost...
Is it just me, or did she kind of say billionaires?
She did. Exactly. She's like, and billionaires like where I have to work because I suck and I can't make it as an independent journalist. So I still need to draw a paycheck, but I have to work for this billionaire.
But I mean, gosh, I've never seen such disdain for like an employer publicly. Oh, well, I guess she gets away with it.
Almost no on-ramp to traditional journalism. Even if you do get a job, journalists' salaries have been stagnant and even declined. And by the way, we don't make that much to begin with. I don't think people understand how bad the world would be without journalists. And let me just preface this by saying, for people that don't know my background, I did not go to journalism school. I built my own audience on the internet. I came from outside journalism and started as a blogger, and then entered into legacy journalism, a system that I have been incredibly, incredibly critical of pretty much my entire career. So I'm definitely not some mainstream media defender. And I think the rise of citizen journalism on apps like TikTok, Instagram, and elsewhere has overwhelmingly been a positive thing. The journalism industry is overrun with elite, underqualified, rich, entitled Nepo babies. Okay. And that part of it is terrible.
Okay. I have to stop there. Rich,
Underqualified. You got it right.
Woo! Okay.
That's not most journalists. And the majority of journalists losing their jobs in situations like this are the working journalists that are doing these investigations of police brutality, or investigating corporations, or holding power to account, or doing really thoughtful, brilliant cultural commentary. I don't want to live in a world where all of the news is delivered through 60-second TikTok videos with retention editing. And I think there's a ton.
Especially when you can get a 90-second video on CNN.
Mm-hmm.
That extra 30 seconds really does help.
Yeah.
Not. That was our limit at King. We had, if I at the end of my career in TV news, if we went a minute and 36 seconds, I had to clip 6 seconds to be back down to 90 seconds or less.
Of really talented journalists that are also just not great, like, social media people. I think of some of my friends who are journalists who do really deep investigations or local reporting, or sit through hour-long city council meetings to, hold some local politician to account. That's really important work, and it's work that somebody should pay for, and it's work that's not rewarded by these social media algorithms. I would love if everyone could become independent journalists, but the economics are just not there. It's really, really hard to amass a subscriber base and then retain that subscriber base over time when you're doing investigative work. And
Bill, I want to stop there because we get the point. I mean, we can watch the end of it in a second, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on the fact that she seems to be blaming it on social media and the rise of social media, and that, like, journalists are not able to compete. The newsrooms are not able to compete with this modern landscape of social media, and acts as if it's a just accepted fact that the journalism is fine. It's just the platform and the presentation. Again, going back to her microphone, going back to the microphone, I really actually think that does tell us a little bit. It's like journalists just can't keep up with these social media realities, and the newsrooms are not making enough money. And that's the problem, and doesn't address the fact at all that there's a lot of disdain and distrust of the media. And that's why people go to social media at all. I mean, yeah, okay, the social media transformation has had significant impacts on the news industry. That's true. But you have to ask yourself, like, why did people move to those platforms? Why are audiences moving to independent creators? Why is it so successful? Because if we were just a bunch of Looney Tunes out here, then I don't know. I don't think if we were not offering anything as a opposite or a check, a balance on what's happening in the mainstream news, I don't think that there would be survival for us either. I think we would have problems too. I don't know. What do you think?
I think Taylor Lorenz is doing the typical millennial thing here. I'm blaming everybody but me. I'm blaming journalism is failing. Legacy journalism is failing. Independent journalism is failing. Journalism is failing. And it's all these other factors. It has nothing to do with the journalists themselves. Never mind that this woman has repeatedly put out false information, misinformation, and doxed people. Never mind the fact that all these social media independent journalists just want to shove a camera in a cop's face to get clicks. Never mind the fact that real journalism only happens in very spare amounts anymore. So I'm going to have a little bit of a fresh take here. I agree with a lot of what she's saying. I do. I truly do. What she's saying makes a lot of sense. But the journalists themselves need to look in the mirror too. If they were doing a good job and doing it competitively, would they have been losing their jobs?
Mm-hmm. Well, and like she's talking about all these people who do investigative journalism. Who's doing investigative journalism now? Like no one is doing investigative journalism because investigative teams got laid off a long time ago. And a lot of the investigations now are also focusing on topics like you sent me, which is like driving is racist or
Right.
pushing a particular narrative that people are just getting sick and tired of listening to. And I think as you said before, like you've said on multiple shows, there's no celebration in the fact that there are legitimate journalists who are doing a good job, who are getting buried by this. And the role that local news could play also getting buried in all this. I say could play because local news, as it's been siphoned down to the bone, it's just been regurgitating national stories too. So it on some level, it's like a self-licking ice cream cone, as my husband says. I mean, they decided to go expand their newscast so that they're live 15 hours a day or something ridiculous like that. They don't have enough staff because they wanted to make more money, so they didn't fill the staff. And so in order to fill time, they regurgitate stories and they take a lot of national news and just repeat it. And then the ratings continue to suck. For short-term gain, they lost the long-term game, and I think the newsrooms have a lot of reckoning that they're still blaming social media or still blaming politicians or just still blaming the audience.
Or blaming big tech.
Yeah, all that stuff. So if you look over at Zero Hedge, covered it, the entire journalism industry is in free fall. Taylor Lorenz blogs the death of mainstream media as BuzzFeed, Insider, and Vice jettison assets, which has just been a continued trickle. This is not anything really new, but the LA Times laying off 20% of its newsroom, that's kind of the big news, I guess, of the week. When you go down here and read what is, this is a tweet from Max Tani, memo to staff from Time Magazine CEO, announcing cuts, saying the company has diligently reduced our expenses, but there's still more work to be done. Where do you think newsrooms could cut costs, Bill, and still salvage journalism? I don't know. In my old newsrooms, I don't know. But before you answer that, don't forget, okay? Don't cut costs around wine. Actually, yes, cut costs, but don't cut value, because this is 50% off and it's still amazing wine. It's wine that will make you feel like you paid hundreds of dollars for it, but you didn't. And in addition, you support my work. If you go to AllisonWinePromo.com, then you get 50% off the wine and 50% off shipping. You get a free bottle of wine if you're new to signing up for it. And you also, again, get to support my work. It's all extremist altitude. If you want to be an extremist, you've been sitting on the sidelines over the last couple of years. You're like, I don't know if being an extremist is for me. I don't want to go to federal prison. This is your opportunity. Okay. You don't have to go join the Minutemen down on the border and fight the federal government with your bare hands like everybody's about to do. You know what? You can watch it all happen on the news. Some people I know are going down to cover it, and you can have a nice glass of wine while you do it. All right. Again, extremist altitude, no filtration, natural fermentation, hand-picked grapes, 200-year-old vineyard, all kinds of good stuff, and you can't get it anywhere else. Why would you want to when you can support my work while you're getting wine? Okay, so Time Magazine saying, hey, look, we've tried to cut costs. We still got more work to do. How do they possibly cut costs and not continue to push journalism into its grave, which is one of the major reasons why journalism is dying in the newsroom?
I'll be honest with you. That question probably goes a little bit above my pay grade. I would say this: if I were a legacy print media, I would stop all of that. Okay. That would be the number one cost cutting. There are going to be some people who lose their jobs, like typesetters, print rollers, guys, on that ground floor level, and the guys who maintain the printing presses. But it's dead. It's gone, and it's never coming back. Okay. So print media, that's where they could cut a lot of costs. I would also say maybe look into, I don't know, Allison. I think sometimes the fleets that they use, if that makes sense, the fleets that newsrooms have at their disposal, they have some really kind of pricier SUVs. When what Chevy Impala would do, they could probably get away with much cheaper vehicles or more inexpensive vehicles. Maybe go into Toyota Priuses or something like that, because nowadays you don't have to have your tripod and your gear bag and your 50-pound camera and a microwave tower to set up your live shot. You don't need that anymore. All you need is this. Or in some situations, the live view backpacks. That's all you need. So, you know, you can definitely look at more cost-effective equipment, and there may be some other steps, but like I said, that one's way above my pay grade. I would have to do some investigative work to find the answer to that.
That's if you don't get sued out of existence, by the way, after you publish the first critical story of a billionaire. And I will admit, a lot of these traditional media companies have accelerated their own demise. They ignored the internet for years. They're condescending content creators and people outside their mainstream ecosystem. They constantly kowtow to corporate and political power. They have these false and deluded notions of objectivity, which, by the way, doesn't exist. And they push a lot of really racist, sexist, regressive crap. But that's not even why a lot of them are going out of business. A lot of them are going out of business fundamentally because the economics of the media ecosystem are broken. Most news companies used to monetize by advertising, and those ad dollars have been completely subsumed by Facebook and Google and tech giants. I don't really know where that leads us other than a pretty dire place where there's really no check on corporate and political power in this country. I did write a lot about this in my book called Extremely Online, but I do think that journalism is something a lot of people won't realize they miss until it's gone.
All right. Well, yeah, like they're the check on corporate and political power. That's the problem. They have been the ones that have been enhancing corporate and political power. That's the problem. They're not the check on corporate and political power. I mean, hey, I'm glad she gave us some of her reasons. She still blames it on social media. She doesn't blame it on the stuff that she brought up, the condescending attitude and whatnot. And so I don't know. I still think she's missing the point. I think the fact that she thinks that the mainstream news is the check on corporate and political power at this point, that to me is borderline delusional.